Hey, it's Webz here again with another Hearthstone deck video, and let's shatter some expectations with Hero Power Mage due to the recent buffs to both Fire Eye and Wildfire. This deck hopes to stall out your opponent with freeze spells in order to chip away at their HP with your empowered Hero Power and Fire Eye to finish them off. For Mulligans, the most important card to keep in your hand is Wildfire, as it allows you to buff up your hero power early, so you can trigger a earlier Fire Eye, and it also allows you to buff up your Reckless Apprentices in order to have some type of board clear within the deck. Some other good cards to keep in your opening hand are cards that generate other cards, such as Wand Maker or Wand Thief. Ice Barrier in certain matchups, such as aggro, is actually another card that you could consider keeping in your opening hand, as it'll allow you to survive so you can stall out your opponent. With that being said, let's get into the games. Alright, time for game 1 against Shaman. Here we're going to mulligan away Fire Eye since we don't want it this early. And we draw into a Reckless Apprentice instead, which is fine, I guess. Ice Barrier could be really important in this matchup, depending on what type of Shaman it is. Alright, so their quest line. This deck actually might be popping up a little bit more because of the recent buffs. Actually, no. I guess it did get directly nerfed. Though I don't know how much one additional cost is going to actually hurt their Perpetual Flame, since that card's actually still a really good removal tool. We draw into a Wildfire, which is great because this is actually pretty early on. They're just going to draw into some more cards. Going to use the Wildfire, of course, to kill their totem. And then use a Tour Guide. I think Tour Guide is actually probably what I misplaced the most with this deck, because whenever I use the card, I should have probably saved it for a turn where I knew I wasn't going to have any mana for the next turn to keep on using the hero power. There were a lot of games where I used it and I knew in my hand that I had no other option, so it was just a waste. They're going to board clear us, which is fine. Trigger the first part of their quest. I'm actually curious which decks will actually come out on top thanks to the nerfs and buffs. I think Beast Hunter has potential, it just needs someone to figure out what those cards can do together. And hell, if this deck even got another support card or two, it would be pretty good too. But I think Pirate Warrior came out best after the buffs. The deck was already kind of relevant. Our hand actually isn't looking that bad. We have plenty of ways to buff up our hero power and do a bunch of damage with our hero power, or even just stall out the game a bit. Here I'm trying to decide how I want to do this. Just going to freeze both minions so we can get the 5/5 out. And then use our hero power to go face. I also think I needed to be a little bit more aggressive while testing this deck with the hero power instead of always just going for the minions. But I was trying to emulate a control type strategy with old freeze mage. Here we're just going to board clear. Drawing into the Fire Eye is actually pretty good at this position, as we should have enough damage from our hero power usage to just play it next turn. And they're going to board clear us. Now, they've completed their quest, but they barely have any cards in hand, which makes it a lot less worrisome than it might normally be. So we're just going to play the Fire Eye or Wand Thief. Grabbing the Rigged Fair game because they don't have enough cards in their hand where I thought it would be a threat. You're going to play Stormcaller and then just pass the turn. We're going to freeze the minion and then destroy it. Deep Freeze was another card that I considered actually including in the deck, but there was just no space. I really wish there was some space. There just wasn't. There's a lot of cards that I wish I had included in this deck, but given the different packages that I was using, I had a limited amount of space that I could actually use. And they're just going to destroy our Fire Eye and summon a bunch of minions. And sad for us, we have actually no way to deal 4 damage directly to face. But hopefully we can generate some type of card to stall out for another couple turns. And we can just use Varden to stall out for an extra turn, I guess. Because we should also be able to hero power next turn and then just win unless they top deck Tidal Wave. Which I've seen people running, so it wouldn't be that much of a shock. Oh, that sucks for them. So we just win. Alright, time for game 2 against Mage. There were actually a bunch of different Hero Power Mage deck variants running around while I was playtesting this deck. However, I think this one is Questline, if I remember right. We're just going to keep the draw power in our opening hand. And this opening hand is even worse than what we had before. Oh, I guess they weren't Questline. So it is probably a mirror match. However, I don't think it's the same variant mirror match. Especially since I kind of came up with this idea by myself. It's actually kind of weird. I prefer mage decks that play a bunch of minions over a bunch of spells, and I prefer hunter decks that play a bunch of spells over a bunch of minions. Like, one of my favorite hunter decks of all time was the Shari combo deck with Barnes, where those were your only 2 minions. That was a really fun deck to play. And I'm trying to think of what other older mage deck that I really enjoyed, but I can't think of it right now. I think they're running more of a secret package than I am, instead of freeze. I want to do something with questline and secrets, which is why I didn't include more secrets in this deck. Also, limited amount of space. Yeah, they're definitely playing more secrets than I am. Just going to play a Wand Maker, try to get a Wildfire. Don't get it, though. Oh, and then we draw a Wildfire. And they're going to play a Wildfire, which confirms it is hero power. And they're going to be able to destroy most of our board. We're going to play 4 Dragon because what are the chances of a mage deck actually running Mutanus? They're more likely to just be able to kill our 4 Dragon and we'll be able to draw into Fire Eye, which will be great. And even if they had Mutanus, we have enough minions in our hand where it wouldn't even matter. I do know there was at least one game where I did have my Fire Eye destroyed by Mutanus because I was being too greedy. I wonder if you could actually make some type of priest deck just centered around Mutanus and stealing cards out of your opponent's hand. Sure, you no longer have Mind Render in order to steal your opponent's hand and deck at the same time, but there might be an interesting way to do it with Mutanus. Though he might be too high of a cost of a card to make it consistent. Our hand's actually not looking that bad right now. You definitely have the card advantage over them. Though the spell power minion is kind of dead in this deck. Because Fire Eye, of course, doesn't scale off of spell power. We're going to buff up our hero power before it's going to draw a bunch of cards here. Hoping to draw into the other wildfire, but it doesn't look like we're going to get it. The original variant of this deck that I tried was running like maybe 4 spells in the deck, just the Potions of Illusion and the Wildfires. But it's really nice to actually get Dungeoneer's ability off. There were actually a lot of games where the 1/1s would help win the game. Here I'm trying to decide if I want to use Fire Eye or not. But we're just going to freeze the opponent minion and then use our hero power. I also wish I was better at using flow casters, because there were a lot of times where I would just be in the swing of destroying all my opponent's minions, and then I'm like, oh wait, I have a flow caster in hand, I should have played that first. I think this might actually be Kipler's list that we're playing against, or very close to it. At this point, I'm kind of assuming that the untriggered secret is Dark Moon rigged game, which is definitely a card that is interesting to include in decks, but when you have a bunch of aggro decks running around, it's not the easiest thing to trigger all the time. Especially when there's no consistent freeze AoE, besides Varden, which is honestly just Frost Nova on a body, and the potential to do 4 damage to your opponent's minions. I don't know, to fix Freeze Mage, I would either give them a consistent AoE freeze again, or maybe some type of spell that does extra damage depending on how many frozen minions your opponent has. I think Glacial Spike has already been a card, so it can't be named that. But that would have been what I would have called it. And here we're just going to duplicate the Fire Eye, so we have an additional one. For a second here, I thought I almost missed lethal. Thankfully, I did not. That would have been embarrassing. Alright, now that we're through the games, let's discuss how well the deck did and why I built the deck the way I did. The deck actually performed worse than I expected it to, but that might be due to the fact that I built the deck kind of greedily, as there were some design decisions which weren't probably the best option in combining these two ideas together, because many games were decided if you drew into Fire Eye at the right moment or not, or even were able to duplicate it off of Potion of Illusion. If you had no way to do either of those things, sometimes you would just lose. Especially when you're relying on cards like Varden and Flurry in order to freeze your opponent's board. Sure, it allows you to freeze 1 or 2 minions early game, however, you can easily get swarmed, and with the rotation of Frost Nova and Blizzard, Freeze Mage doesn't really have any legs to stand on when it comes to stalling out the opponent for a long period of time, which kinda sucks. It was a classic Hearthstone deck that has just kinda died out in the past 2 years. However, with that being said, it's not like I don't understand the potential of the Freeze Mage package in current standard format. It's honestly 1 or 2 cards away from actually being really relevant. However, it has no real big payoffs, and that's what the hero power support was supposed to do in this deck, was to be your big payoff in order to stall out your opponent. But Fire Eye is still too high of a cost of a card in order to combo that off consistently with Potion of Illusion. So if your opponent ends up killing off your Fire Eye, you don't get a second one. And since you're not running any other direct damage spells in the deck, you kind of run out of firepower to actually abuse the fact that you're stalling out the opponent. Which gets me on to the next point of the cards that were greedy to include, but I included anyways. These cards being Wandmaker in particular, a Runic Orb would have actually been better overall to include in the deck. However, I wanted to have a better chance of generating wildfires in order to get either a 4 damage or a 5 damage hero power because I thought it would be funny. However, for testing, Runic Orb is probably a better card to include in the 2 slot. Ignites or Fireballs would actually be just as good as having these Venomous Scorpids in the deck, as it would give you consistent threats to do damage to your opponent. However, I was really focusing more on the hero power package instead of the Freeze Mage package, which is probably a mistake, but I wanted to abuse the recent buffs to Fire Eye and Wildfire. And speaking of those buffs, if it weren't for those buffs, I would assume that Hero Power Mage is probably dead in the water and it wouldn't get any more support in the next mini set or the set afterwards. However, I have a sneaking suspicion if they chose to buff up Hero Power Mage that there is going to be some type of new support in the next mini set, which might be a good time to revisit this deck and see if it has even more potential than it already does. So if you wanted something that wasn't Fire Mage or Questline Mage that's kind of new and recent, Hero Power might be the way to go. With that being said, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, a subscribe, and a comment down below. And until next time, bye bye.